It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. I can't really think of a better way to say it, but there is a very specific tone to the work of Robert Smigel. When he was a writer on Saturday Night Live, he wrote these almost childlike sketches where the punchline is sometimes just the premise of the show. I mean, look at his animated stuff on TV Funhouse or the Superfans, the guys who say to bears.
We are coming to you live from Ditka's here on Thanksgiving Day, a day for giving thanks for or taking punishment from a team that is known as the Bears. The Bears.
He went on to become the head writer for Late Night with Conan O'Brien, creating some of the funniest sketches on the show, including one of the funniest, simplest, and, if I am frank with you, dumbest recurring late-night sketches ever, Triumph the Insult Comic Dog.
Westminster, the pomp, the pageantry. I tell you, Conan, there are many dog shows out there, but there's only one Westminster for me to poop on.
Now Robert Smigel is a writer and director. Together with Adam Sandler, he made a new movie called The Week Of. It's a wedding movie. Sandler plays Kenny, the father of the bride. He's a working-class guy from Long Island. He can't really afford the wedding that he wishes he could give his daughter. Chris Rock is his co-star. He plays Kirby, a heart surgeon from L.A. and the father of the groom. Kirby has the money to help out with everything, but Sandler's character has a hard time accepting it. And that's the central conflict. It's a movie that talks about tradition and class and coming of age and loss. And since it's an Adam Sandler flick, there are a few scenes where Adam Sandler does a funny baby voice. Here's a little bit from The Week Of. In this scene, Sandler has just picked up Chris Rock's character from a hotel in Manhattan, and they are heading to Long Island for what is turning out to be a very long, hot car ride.
How we doing with the AC? You good still? You don't need it, right? I'm just talking gas-wise. It's better off.
I'm just saying, AC would be great.
You say it and we'll turn it on.
I said it.
That's right, 100%. I'll just hit the switch and it's blasting.
It's really hot in here.
It's getting there, right? All right, go to sleep.
It's hard to sleep because of all the noise
Yeah.
from
All right.
outside.
How's this? Let me turn it on for you. Better?
Yeah.
Okay, let's turn it on.
Robert Smigel, welcome to Bullseye.
Thank you. Very nice to be here. I'm a fan of the show. I like that you chose that clip because it's got I think that's Morning Edition in the background.
Anytime I hear NPR in a movie, I'm going to be frank, I'm disappointed that it's not me. Anytime.
Well, you know, Adam's always trying to slip NPR into his movies to, you know, because that's his core audience.
Sure. Robert, the tone of this movie is pretty different from the other Happy Madison, Adam Sandler films.
It is. I think it's different than most studio comedies, I would say. Rather than, you know, it's very naturalistic and, you know, it's shot, there's a lot of handheld and it feels verite, as it were, to use an NPR word.
Sandler does very few silly voices. There's like 2 or 3 instances of a silly voice.
Yes, he does. He does his Chris Rock impression that he's always done. I had to work that into the movie. He does a very abstract Chris Rock impression that sounds more like, you know, the lead singer of the Stylistics or something. Sandler, what are we gonna do?
What do you think are Sandler's best qualities as a performer, as a movie star?
Well, Adam was always one of these guys who, like, from the first day at Saturday Night Live, he's very genuine and very unpretentious and unguarded. And he had a lot of balls when he was hired as a writer-performer. He used to literally say to people, I'm going to be huge. Smigey, I'm going to be like Eddie Murphy. I'm going to be huge. I don't know. I can feel it. And it was really very refreshing because a lot of people at that show play the passive-aggressive game. Like, what? My sketch? Come on. No, please. My sketch is the worst. And you kind of get rewarded sometimes for playing that game. And I was always sort of a clumsy version of Adam, where I just had no poker face, and I couldn't help myself when I thought, my sketch deserved to be in. But Adam was just like a friendly, completely what you see is what you get kind of personality who, and that's sort of been his strength all these years. Like when he's on screen, he's really just being himself. He never had to depend on an arch kind of personality. I think his performance in this movie is the best part of the movie. There were days when he had to do something very subtle, but very difficult at the same time, and I was just amazed at how good he was, how effortless it was.
It's very different to watch him not be a romantic lead, and I think also to be such a dad. I mean, this is really a dad movie.
It is a dad movie, and that was one of the ways we bonded when we were younger at SNL, was our families were very close-knit. We had that in common. We both looked up to our dads more than anyone, just worshiped them. And, they were different. His dad was gruffer, I think, than my dad, but they had a lot of similarities, and there's parts of both dads in this movie, and some other dads I know. But Adam's character is, it's the movie in a way is a bit of a love letter to a certain kind of fatherhood.
You're a father. How is it different from what you imagined or what you expected?
I emulated my own dad in many ways. Like, I'm going to be a dad just like mine. I just wanted to just remind them every day how loved they are and encourage them. I mean, my dad was insane, like in terms of bragging about me. When I was like 5 years old, I could draw Charlie Brown really well. And like, he was a dentist, so every patient was forced to look at my comic strips when I was 5 years old. And I would meet these people later on in life, and it's like they had 1,000-mile stare on them, that like they'd been, war veterans, and just, yes, I've talked to your father. I know everything. I know your whole life. But I did want to make my kids feel like they could do anything. My first son, was the greatest thing on earth when he was born. And my son ended up being, on the extreme side of the spectrum. And he's wonderful. And I've learned so much by having him in my life. It's been an incredible gift. I mean, I would still trade everything for him to be able to communicate and, be able to, enjoy everything that the rest of us can. But it has been a gift. And then I have, it wasn't for 10 years that we were able to have the focus to have more children, and we had twin boys, and, it was amazing. And I think it's even easier in a way because they entertain each other too. I mean, it's been, a relative breeze, and it's too much fun. And I want to hold on to every second of it. So, because at some point they're going to think I'm an idiot. It's coming. It's coming very soon.
I mean, I think you might, well, on the one hand, you are probably the kind of dad whose children might be very proud of him in his, you have a very exciting career for adolescents, but it's also
it's very true.
Probably literally the most embarrassing, like a guy who does,
crouches behind a desk and holds a puppet in his arm. It's not embarrassing to a 10-year-old. That's the fun part. That's what I'm saying. They're going to think I'm an idiot.
When you're doing the Triumph voice for the family dog for the 14-year-old, it's like, oh boy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, fortunately, I don't do that at home, but they would be happy if I did. I let them put the puppet on their hands and do the voice and do whatever they want with it. But they, it's like countdown to reality. At some point, everything's going to change, and they're going to be, oh, my dad does that. But right now, it's just a joy. They can't believe I get to say I poop on you. You know, all these things, and I there's tons of stuff that I will not show them that I've done because it's just inappropriate, and you know, so. You know, I have shown them some other Saturday Night Live stuff, but it's mostly like Chris Farley and things I think they'll enjoy.
Including, Robert, you've done inappropriate things for them for network television during prime time.
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Mistakes have been made. I didn't know. I've always been interested in doing what hadn't been done. That's been my you know, muse and my problem at the same time. I have so many failures. The Dana Carvey show is like the tip of the iceberg. That's what's so sad and amusing at the same time.
Well, I won't have you describing the Dana Carvey show as a failure because it was an extraordinary success in most of the ways that matter.
Thank you.
Maybe not for your continued employment, but
that's the problem. Like, you know, I actually heard someone, Josh Greenbaum, the director, say, you know, those guys stuck to their guns, and if they hadn't, there's no way there would have been a documentary about it 20 years later. Nobody would be talking about it that way. And I'm like, yeah, that's the goal of every showrunner, to make a show that pisses the network off so much that there's a documentary on Hulu. That's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. The screening at the Bell House in Brooklyn.
What's amazing about the documentary about the show was that, you know, how quickly you forget. It was 20 years ago, and the internet as we know it basically didn't exist. Pretty close
no, there was
to
just
didn't exist.
If you wanted feedback on your show, you would have to go to these Usenet groups, like Alt Fan. Conan O'Brien was one of the first ones, and that's how we knew that we had fans. But they were these tiny groups of like 20 people who would talk about the show.
Oh, I was definitely posting in alt.fan.newsradio at the time.
There you go. Yeah.
And so I think to some extent, you just didn't know either the impact that the show was having positively or negatively in the way that you would now. Like now the feedback would be immediate.
No, it was pretty immediate, I have to tell you, because they had a meter that they had. It was like new technology where they were able to track Nielsen ratings. What they didn't do it for every show, but they would like spend the money for like pilots or first early episodes of shows, what they called the minute by minutes. And so we knew that we had inherited an enormous audience from Home Improvement, and that within the first 5 minutes, that audience had dropped by like 40%. People were just, diving out of their windows, trying to get away from their television sets.
I want to talk about your time on Saturday Night Live,
Sure.
Which was kind of your first big break, was as a writer on Saturday Night Live.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
You had been working doing sketch and improv in Chicago, and you got hired as a writer on SNL. And your first year as a writer on SNL was maybe Saturday Night Live's most ill-fated year, or second after the one when Lorne Michaels left, maybe.
Yes, I would call it a second to the Gene Dumanian year. Yeah.
It's the year when big movie stars like Robert Downey Jr. and Anthony Michael Hall and Randy Quaid,
Joan Cusack, two-time Oscar nominee after that.
Yeah, lots of brilliant comic actors,
without question,
were in the cast of the program. I want to play a sketch that you wrote, and from what I understand, this was the first sketch that you got on the air. It stars Madonna, and it's Madonna hosting a kind of Spanish language musical talk show as Marika. You're in a sketch. You're one of the backup singers. Damon Wayans is there. John Lovitz is there. And so what we are about to hear is her segueing from her opening number, which was a borderline nonsensical Latin pop version of Take On Me by a-ha.
Yes, it was a mashup of Take On Me and La Bamba.
Yeah.
Before mashups existed, my friend.
We're going from Take On Me into La Bamba here.
Hilarious.
I think it, for good or ill, reflects the Robert Smigel aesthetic.
I guess it does in a way, because it's an affectionate parody of something kind of hokey. And I just looked at her and thought she would be a really funny Spanish TV host, and that hadn't really been parodied on the show yet. And then the sketch is just very low concept. I wrote it with the Kids in the Hall guys, McCullough and McKinney. Then I didn't get a sketch on for 4 weeks. And I was in danger of being fired, actually.
You ended up writing the last sketch of the year, too, right?
I did. It was back then there was this awful trend starting in television, cliffhangers that, on shows like Dynasty and Dallas, where there'd be a fire or someone would be murdered, and, they'd make you wait over the course of the summer to find out what happened. So I just went right at the show's problems, because I was very much, other people didn't like doing this, but, at that time Letterman was my TV hero, and he was all about that kind of meta or, self-referential comedy. So for me, it just came very naturally. Well, let's do a show that's a cliffhanger. Let's end the season on a cliffhanger and have a fire, and Lauren has to decide who to save, and, and who's going to survive the fire, because we kind of knew that it was going to be a rough off season. So yeah, that sketch caused some grief when I wrote it, but it might have helped save my job over the summer, actually.
I mean, it's funny that you say that sketch at the end of the season made you laugh and saved your job. It's also a pretty brutal concept for a show in dire straits.
Yeah, it was. But the show got a lot of positive press for it helped the show. And because, it was people appreciated that we were able to make fun of our situation in such a painfully honest way.
I want to talk about Triumph the Insult Comic Dog, the beloved character that will follow you to your grave.
Yes. I always tell people that my tombstone will read, this is a lovely tombstone for me to poop on. I'm stuck with it.
I was trying to think of the first time that I remember seeing Triumph the Insult Comic Dog, because I think that a lot, it has such a refined form now, but it took quite a long time to get there.
To evolve, yeah. And the voice was even different. I've watched the first appearance, and he talked much more like this. He was more slow and deliberate. That was the voice that I used for dogs since I was 10 years old. That's just a voice I had in my head for dogs. My family was, my mom's side was all first-generation Russian immigrants. And for some reason, I associated that voice. When I imagined dogs talking, that was the voice in my head. And, the only awful explanation I can surmise is because it didn't work for cats. It didn't work for gerbils. It just worked for dogs. And the only explanation I've ever come up with is that dogs just have that look of hope in their eyes, much like a Russian immigrant who's just landed in Ellis Island. Just look at all of this, America. I can't explain why I made the association. That's the closest I can come.
This is the first appearance of Triumph.
Oh, good. You'll see how different it sounds.
Yeah, it's a Conan sketch about the very talented dogs at the Westminster Kennel Club dog show. And so there are dogs playing banjos, dogs doing magic tricks, dogs doing plate spinning. You know, the joke being obviously the dog show being turned into a talent show, right?
Yes, and we had done this bit for like 4 years at this point.
and this is Triumph popping onto the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you very much. It's great to be here, Conan O'Brien. Thank you for having me, Conan. The Conan O'Brien show, it's a great show for me to poop on. That's right, all right. Who do we have here, Conan? Who you got for guests? Siskel and Ebert, that's great. Doesn't everyone love Siskel and Ebert? They're terrific, oh yes. You know, some people have their favorite, Siskel, Ebert. I think they're both great. For me to poop on. All right, no, seriously, Ebert, you're terrific, Ebert. You look great. You lost a lot of weight, you know that? I tell you what, I still wouldn't hump your leg. That's right, okay, no, you're terrific, Ebert. I'd hump it, but I'd hump your leg, but I would pretend it was Jeffrey Lyon's leg. You know what I'm saying? Oh.
I forgot that one.
I mean, you seem like a guy who is, to some extent, concerned about being a nice guy.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing that I would do that I, as myself, that Triumph does, pretty much. So it is fun to have that outlet because, I think I am a nice guy, but I'm also a cynical at the same time. I always have been. And Triumph has been a fun way to express it. And there's something about it that I've always enjoyed. I mean, I could have never been a real insult comic. I've always liked that there's still a layer of irony on some level that exists with a puppet insulting a person as opposed to a real person, because the structure of his jokes a lot of times is deliberately hacky, even though we try to write really, really clever jokes. And I think, I've worked with amazing writers, and I'm proud of the jokes he does. But I don't think it hurts as much when, a low status, tiny little dog with an accent is crapping on you as much as a real human being. Because you know that it's a game on some level. You're more aware that he's just doing his job.
Well, Robert Smigel, I'm so grateful to you for taking all this time to talk to me. It's a real honor.
Oh, please.
Your work Robert, your work has genuinely touched my life, and it means a lot to me. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Jesse.
Robert Smigel. The Week Of is available to stream right now on Netflix, and it is really lovely. Just not a word that I would necessarily use to describe other Adam Sandler movies, but it's really lovely. You can also find some of Smigel's other work, like The Dana Carvey Show and the absolutely hilarious Triumph Election Special, on Hulu.